Rapoport is a lifetime advocate, organizer, and elected official. Was the Secretary of State of the state of Connecticut, the leader and president of Common Cause, the DC watchdog, Demos, the DC think tank, and in the state of Connecticut, Democracy Works, which worked on issues that are very important to this group in particular, voter participation, campaign finance reform, things of that nature. So it's my pleasure to invite Miles up to the stage. And then we're very fortunate to have Denise Merrill, who's the current Secretary of State of the state of Connecticut, who's also going to say a few words. So let's hear it for Miles and Denise.
So when I heard that Denise was going to be in the neighborhood tonight, I decided that I shouldn't simply live in the past. I should connect myself to the present as well. So as former Secretary of the State, current Secretary of State, I thought we could do this together. Let me just say a couple of words, because I think that today has been a great day in terms of the collaborative work between the IOP and the Ash Center, which I'm proud to represent tonight. We did a lot of work together, registered a lot of people, from the petting zoo to the dorms to the tea stop at Harvard Square to tonight. It's been a wonderful collaborative effort, and I think it's key. By the way, so Linda Lake, who some of you may know as a pollster, had an article recently that said voter registration is the real resistance, which I thought was a really interesting phrase, because I think this is what it's about. So thanks for all of you who participated in it, and also tonight. I want to say the theme of the whole school, or the democracy work of the school, is making democracy work. And that has a number of elements to it, which could be a 45-minute lecture, but I'm not. I'm going to condense it into 3. But I think there's 3 really significant pieces of it that all need to go together. So one is there's a policy part of making democracy work. There's a whole suite of policies that seem to me that would, if adopted, make a huge difference, whether it's on voting rights and same-day voter registration, automatic voter registration, which Denise has gotten brought to Connecticut, the restoration of voting rights to people with felony convictions. There are 5 million people in the United States who cannot vote by virtue of a felony conviction. It's crazy, way above any international norms whatsoever. There's the money in politics issue. We have a system that is awash in huge campaign contributions, mostly unaccountable, mostly untrackable at this point, and a real problem. We have a terrible problem with gerrymandering and redistricting, which is done either for incumbent protection or partisan domination. In either case, it's a miserable way to run an airline. November 8th, by the way, we're going to do the Ash Center is going to do a conference on redistricting reform. You'll all be notified of it. Hopefully it'll be good. So there's a policy agenda that needs to be adopted, okay? Secondly, there is in fact a resistance agenda. Democracy is under threat. The very first IOP forum this year, Amy, was about democracy being in peril. And the question is, it's in peril from a lot of sources. There is really, and I was just talking to Donna Brazil about it, a huge problem with cyber attacks on our election system, far deeper than has been publicly stated so far, something that has to be dealt with on a long-standing and an important, deep basis, okay? There is voter suppression. There are people who have decided that it is in their political interest to keep people from voting. And so you have a slew of laws, now commissions, that are aimed at narrowing the right to vote, one that was fought for by so many people for so long and can't be allowed to happen. So there needs to be resistance. There's a resistance agenda, unfortunately. Shouldn't need to be. Democracy should be something that is a shared and bipartisan issue, but not always the case. So let's keep fighting regardless of where the threats are coming from. Lastly, there's a participation agenda, okay? It is really about, it's not about just governmental policies. It is about people participating. That's why so much of this work that you're doing tonight, so many of the organizations that you're promoting are so critically important. Having people jump in to register and vote is important. Having people run for office is important, which is something the IOP has been famous for promoting for many, many years. So it's not just about the policies. It's not just about fighting back the bad things. It is about people getting involved at every single level. So for me, it's a delight to be at the Kennedy School, at least for the next 2 years, working as the senior practice fellow in American democracy, hopefully working with all of you to do whatever we can do to get a vibrant, inclusive democracy with an even playing field for everybody that we can all be proud of. The last part, and a big asterisk here on what are the elements of the agenda, are we need public officials. who are willing to get out there, who are willing to take a democracy agenda and really move it. So that's why I thought it was so important that we have, since a public official tonight with us who's doing exactly that, to share a couple of minutes of my time with my friend and colleague and successor, Denise Merrill, Secretary of the State of Connecticut. Denise?
Thank you, Miles. Thank you. Well, I'm really glad I dropped by. Yes, I guess I am the practitioner in the room, if you will. Been in politics a long time. But really, I would just want to say a few words about the last thing Miles talked about, and that's the participation part. And what's in peril right now is people's sense that not only does their vote not matter, but they don't matter. And just in the last year, or maybe 2 years now, I've heard a lot from young people, what can I actually do? How do I get involved? There's really a hunger for that out there. And that's something I see you providing today and getting involved with. And the question I have asked myself for years, and both through studies and organizations and trying to bring people together to think about, is why does somebody choose to get involved? What makes the difference between, and there's lots of studies about how certain communities, just want no part of government or voting, and others are very engaged. And so we did a study in Connecticut a couple of years ago called the Civic Health Index. We went out and asked lots of people about what they were involved in and why, and how did they get involved. And there were lots of answers, and we asked minority communities, and we asked faith communities, and all kinds of it. We even asked, like, how many times a week do you have dinner with your family? Those kind of like sociological questions. I don't know if any of you know about Mr. Putnam bowling alone and all that sort of thing, about what's happened to American association. And there was one simple but very profound answer that we got over and over again, and that was because someone asked. And that's what you're here to do tonight. You're asking people to get involved. But if you don't ask them, they may not feel welcome. And I think that's something we all need to think about all the time. I think about it because I've done a lot of work trying to get, for example, women to run for office. It's not easy running for office these days, if you haven't noticed. It's a blood sport, sort of. And a lot of women shy away from it. But I've made it sort of one of my missions to try to get people in and invite them in. And it's working, I think so. I think the most important thing we're doing here tonight is you are asking people in to whatever you have a passion about. And that is the most important thing that you could be doing. So don't ask yourself, what could I be doing that's more? Because what you're doing right now is the most important thing. So thank you very much. It's been great meeting a lot of you tonight, and good luck with everything. You're our only hope. Thanks.
And other than that, do everything Deray tells you.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for being here. It really means a lot. All right, so we're going to go right ahead and introduce Deray. Deray, if you're ready to go. So, it's a great honor to introduce Deray Mckesson. Maybe somebody who I can't do justice to introducing, but he's an activist and educator who many of us know, is prominent for his role leading Black Lives Matter and Campaign Zero to fight police violence. One thing that I found out was that Deray is, in my kind of research and preparing for this, is that Deray is no stranger, like many of you here, to youth civic action, leading as early as your teen years, right? Leading a grant organization in Baltimore. So if you want any tips about how to get your younger brothers and sisters involved, that's probably some insight you didn't expect to get. So Deray is going to share some insights with us tonight. And then obviously, if you've heard of Crooked Media's podcast, Deray has a hugely influential and successful podcast, Pod Save the People, that it's once a week, right? 60 to 90 minutes once a week. That's about activism, culture, politics, the intersections, that for the people in this room in particular will be hugely helpful and insightful for the rest of your careers, I think. So without further ado, Deray Mckesson.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I just have a couple dots to share. I'll start with Jason Stockley, officer in St. Louis. Jason Stockley pulled over Anthony Lamar Smith. He shot him 5 times. And before he shot him, he said, "I'm gonna kill this mother effer." And at the trial, his officer, his attorney dismissed that statement as mere human emotion in a dangerous situation. And the judge in that case said that in his 20 years on the bench, he had never seen somebody dealing drugs who didn't have a weapon. And I say that I start there because I don't know much, but I know that Anthony Lamar Smith should be alive today. I know that Mike Brown should be alive today, Rakia Boyd, Tamir Rice, that they should be alive today. And I start there because I think about the response to their deaths, which has been the protests. And for me, this is a fundamental question of what power looks like and how do we build power. That when I think about what power is the ability to influence the decision-making process. When I think about what politics is the decision-making process. So when we took to the streets in 2014 in Ferguson and people are in the streets in St. Louis again today, that is because people are trying to build power again. That I think of protest not as the answer. We know that protest isn't the solution, but what it does is it creates space for the solution. It opens up a conversation so people can think about what the world should be like. But what does it mean to live in a place where you have to be in the street for you to influence politics? What does it mean when the only way that you feel like you can be heard is to be in the street night over night? People forget that we were in the street for 400 days in the first wave of the protests. People forget that it was illegal to stand still in August, September, and October of 2014, that if we stood still for more than 5 seconds, we were arrested immediately. People forget those things, but we remember them because they were the only way that we had power in those moments. And I know that being in the street is not the only way to build power, that voting is also another beautiful way to build power. That too often people talk about voting as the only way to build power. I think about our last meeting with President Obama, and he talked about voting. If you care about the country, then you will vote. And the reality is I voted my entire life, and I still got tear gassed, pepper sprayed, arrested, and assaulted by cops. That voting alone wasn't the answer. But we know that voting is one of the important ways that people can think about building power in this moment. That when we think about protests allowed us to push back against these dominant cultural narratives. When we think about social media, it allowed us to help people see the power that they had, because we know that one of the things that oppression does is it convinces you that you don't have power when you do have power. And there's so many people in this last election who were like, I'm not gonna vote because the president doesn't do anything to my life. And we saw that turn out to be not true. There were so many people who didn't vote because they were just like, it doesn't matter. And we know that that's one of the tricks of oppression, is that it confuses you to believe that like you don't actually matter in the grand scheme. But when we think about power as the ability to influence the decision-making process, we know that part of your work as organizers is to invite everybody into that process. I'll leave with 5 key thoughts. The first is that we aren't born woke, but something wakes us up. And for so many people, it was an organizer, it was a tweet, it was a Facebook post, it was a phone call, it was something at the lunch table that like helped them think about the world differently. The second thing is that this work will always be more important than it is popular. That if you are looking to be the most popular person at the ball, then this is not the right work for you. That organizing is often like the hard, painful work. Sometimes you don't know the payoffs, but I know that you will make a difference in this. The third is that you already have permission. You know, people think that like Harriet Tubman called us and was like, you know, be organizers, go in the street. And the reality is that we were just regular people who were like, I think the world can be a better place, and let me figure out how to make the world that place. And we did it. And it often always starts really small. That I remember the first meeting I ever went to in Ferguson with 6 people. And I think about my platform, then I had 800 followers on Twitter, I have 960,000 now, but it started out small, and most of this work starts out really small. The fourth is about what it means to empower people. That I've heard organizers talk about empowering other people. And remember that you can't give people power. You are not God, you are not the Almighty. But what you can do is help people find the power that they already have. And like that is a part of your work, is helping people believe in themselves in ways that they didn't. And voting is one of those ways. Voting is a way to say that I as a person am making a choice. Too often when we think about voting, we talk about voting for people, but the reality is in cities and towns across the country, we're also voting on issues, and people forget that. That voting is a way to say, here's my choice, and that the aggregate of people making choices actually changes the world. And the fifth is that systems and structures often change people's behaviors, but it's neighbors that change people's minds. And so much of this work is not only about changing systems and structures, but it's about changing the way that people think about the world. And the sixth will be my final point, is about imagination and freedom. That I think about freedom as not only the absence of oppression, but the presence of justice and joy. And for so many of us, we spend so much time on the absence of oppression. We spend so much time on the things that we need to tear down so that the bad things won't exist. But we don't spend enough time thinking about the world that we want to build, the world that we know that we can have. So when Trump says things like "Make America Great Again," that ask is about memory and recall. That we've lived in a world where white people have terrorized everybody and white people have controlled everything. We've had that world before, and he is trying to bring us back to that. But when we think about a world of equity and justice and joy, we've not seen that world before. We have to imagine that and fight for that. If you can't imagine it, it's hard to fight for it. And my push to you would be to imagine a world that is worth fighting for. That some people, when you ask them what freedom looks like, they can't paint that picture for you. When you ask them, what does equity, what does joy and justice look like at scale, they can't think of that. And if you can't dream that big, it's hard for you to fight in this fight in the way that the fight needs you in this moment. So I'll say, as we leave, I'm excited to be in this fight with you. I believe that we can win, and I think about hope as not only, I think about hope as a belief that our tomorrows can be better than our todays. I think about hope as this understanding that we can do it, and it might not always be easy, and it might not happen in our lifetime, but it'll happen one day, and we fight because we know it can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deray. So, yeah, guys, get back to it. Start learning about these organizations, how you can get involved, and start a dialogue. Yeah, let's get back to it.